Hello everyone, Andy here, and here's what you can look forward to in today's episode.
In today's episode, myself and guest Ben Isaacs run through our top 10 games to look forward to in the 2025 season. Ben starts off with a rogue Week 1 selection.
It is the game I am most looking forward to in the first week of the season, and it's probably not the one that most people have got circled.
I have an idea that could spice up the Vikings-Steelers Dublin game.
I would love it in week 4 if Rodgers is still without a team and they go, right, Rodgers has picked this team, it's going to be Steelers or the Vikings, find out on Sunday at kickoff, and he comes out with this massive array of Steelers, especially if it's the Steelers being the home team.
As me and Ben compile our list from 10 to 1. Hope you guys enjoy.
Hello and welcome back to the Across the Pod NFL podcast. I am, as ever, your host, Andy Davis, and today's episode, we are going to review the now released 2025 NFL schedule. And we've got a special guest to go through that with us. But before we do that, let's head to On This Day. Now, in 1969, Baltimore and Cleveland and Pittsburgh agreed to move from the NFC to the AFC, and the likes of Matt Ryan, Kean Coleman, Austin Eckler, Matt Castle, Bucs legend Robert Aguayo, and one of our own, David Ajabo, were all born. Now, I mentioned my special guest. He is a returning guest on the show. With her today, back on the show, is Ben Isaac. Ben, how are you?
I'm great, Andy. How are you?
Good. Yeah, good. Glad now the schedule's released. We know know what's what, and what's going to happen, and obviously to the theme of today's episode. But apart from that, yeah, all good. Weather's amazing at the moment. I mean, we had the 1 day of rain recently, but apart from that, literally, it's been here in Cardiff. I don't know where you're based, Ben, but it's literally so warm right now.
Well, I'm in London, and it has been super, super, super hot until today. It's just been grey all day. I had to put a jacket on to go and walk the dogs, and I was reading more stuff about the schedule while I was on the dog walk, and I thought I was transported to kind of mid-autumn. Like, I'm there thinking about these games taking place in like October, and it felt a bit October. I don't know if it's just because it's been so sunny and hot here. This is the first grey, cool day we've had in ages, but maybe that's just all part of like the NFL marketing plan to get us in the autumn and winter state of mind and be like, forget about summer. We're not a summer sport. Let's take you forward to autumn already.
Well, your team, of course, I'm sure you're keeping an eye on the Bears and their schedule. And this news has come out very recently about Caleb Williams. To quote the report from, I believe it's ESPN via Seth Wickersham, I think I probably butchered that name, but it says Caleb Williams was so concerned about being drafted by the Bears that he and his family weighed circumventing the entire NFL draft. They spoke with lawyers to find a way around the league CBA and considered signing with the UFL. I mean, that is, for a guy who was the consensus number 1 pick, that is quite the revelation.
First off, there is more chance of either of us signing for a team in the UFL than Caleb Williams doing that a year ago. It simply wouldn't have happened. The risk of injury in such a poor league where you've got no idea who's going to be blocking, you are never going to take that risk ever, 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 ever. And I can believe that his dad thought about it. Now, his dad has always been quite involved, over-involved. He's one of those quarterback dads. And does like to talk and kind of run his mouth a bit. So he'd said Chicago is the place quarterbacks go to die. Hard to argue with that, Carl Williams. Like, that's a fair comment. And it said that Caleb had said, do I want to go there? I don't think I can do it with Shane Waldron. Now, basically, Caleb did not like the offensive coordinator there, and Shane Waldron was fired during the season. Shane Waldron was absolutely atrocious last year and a big reason why the Bears had problems. And the Bears' offense improved immeasurably after he was fired. Now, it's all well and good because although they talked about he would like to be in Minnesota because Minnesota's got the best wide receiver in the league and an offensive-minded head coach. So that is a great place for a young quarterback to go. But then when he visited Chicago, the Bears told him, look, we're drafting you no matter what. So that's happening. And then he started to fall in love with the place. And he has been a leader there in Chicago. He won't love that this has come out now because it's kind of just ancient history because he settled in so well. But I don't blame him looking at the offensive coaches in Chicago and the head coach, Matt Eberflus, and thinking, what am I letting myself in for? But I think it will all have worked itself out in the end. Ben Johnson is clearly the brightest head coach candidate of the last couple of years. And he was interested in the Bears job the previous summer, but it wasn't going to be open. They decided they're not firing Matt Eberflus. That's why Ben Johnson didn't take any other jobs. He had job offers, but the job he wanted was the Bears, and the Bears could have had him a year ago. So wasted opportunity for the Bears, but they got there eventually. And on paper, the marriage of Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams looks like, a match made in heaven.
Yeah, I think if you see what he's done with the Lions and their offense, if that can translate to his head coaching career, then, the Bears are in for quite the head coach quarterback duo. Now, in today's episode, we are doing our top 10 games to look forward to in the 2025 season. So the schedule's now been released, and we're going to try, like our normal top 10 list, we're each going to give 5 nominees, and then we'll try, in amongst those 10 nominations, compile our list from 10 to 1. So, Ben, you are the guest. So, as is tradition for guests, you go first. What is your first nominee for our top 10 games to look forward to in 2025?
First, Andy, I've got to give people a little bit of a peek behind the curtain of my process. So when you invited me on this a couple of days ago, I thought, this is great. This is a really fun topic. Excited to do this. I thought, as soon as I can just sit down and look at all of the games. And then once I did, I then just started cursing you. Like I was so looking forward to do this until I realized quite how hard it was going to be to start narrowing it down, especially because I decided to set myself particular rules. Now, you didn't say this, I said it. I thought, okay, I am going to avoid, if possible, divisional matchups, simply because I know that so many of them are going to be good, and I'm going to try and look outside those. I also set myself a target of no team mentioned more than once, which again made it harder. And then I thought, I don't want more than one game in any one week. Now, that one I've absolutely failed at. But I decided to make a list of 8 so that if we were doubling up, I'd be like, okay, well, I'm going to ignore that one. Andy's nailed that one. So I'm going to give my first one. And this, to me, is the standout game of week 1. It is the game I am most looking forward to in the first week of the season. And it's probably not the one that most people have got circled for week 1. Now, this is a 6 p.m. game in the UK. So easy one to watch. I mean, nobody knows if Sky is going to have the contract next season, but I could imagine this being Sky's game. I can't remember if I'm saying this because these are 2 teams that did not get near the playoffs. But the Raiders at the Patriots is absolutely the week 1 game I am most looking forward to. These are 2 teams that have had absolutely fantastic off seasons. The Patriots had perhaps the best draft of any team. In fact, I think on college days, Don Corbett described it as perhaps like the greatest draft ever that he can remember. They nailed everything that they needed. The Raiders have had such a grown-up offseason with all the moves they've made. They've got Ashton Genty, who is the player I'm perhaps most looking forward to seeing in the NFL this season out of all the rookies. So you've got this rebuilt Patriots team that I think is going to take a big step forward under Vrabel. You've got this Raiders team that's been reimagined under Pete Carroll with the most exciting running back to come into the league in quite a few years. I cannot wait for this game. These are 2 teams I think in a Euros 2 time, they are going to be playoff contenders and are going to be really good. And this is the start of their journey.
Wow, I was not expecting that. I'm not gonna lie. I don't think either team features on my list once. All the ones.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you.
Because I mean, I found in the end I went through every week and just earmarked just to get a rough idea of what games I was looking at, and I went for the whole schedule each week and put down games. I had 18 games. I found that were really stand out for me, and not all of them had Raiders or Patriots. There was some.
Now, the thing is, Andy, I've got them down in week 1 because they might not be what I think they could be this season. So at least see them in week 1, because by the time week 10 rolls around, it might be like, there's still so many holes on these rosters that they are still a year at least away of being respectable. So I'm going to catch them early. That's why I'm on it in week 1. I'm so glad that they're meeting in week 1, because if it was week 10, I might hesitate.
Well, I kind of know what you mean, because that's why I went against my only rule really I had was going against week 18 slate, because at that point the games could be meaningless. Like, for example, the two I picked out week 18 were Packers at Vikings and Commanders at Eagles. But at that point, we could have divisions wrapped up. Teams could be already in the playoffs, resting players. I don't think at that point, those games wouldn't be the Sky game, for example, it wouldn't be prime time, apart from the ones that have real meaning behind it. A game where the division's already wrapped up is not going to be one to look forward to, because they're going to rest players, it's not going to be what we want. But I went for my first nominee, was actually also week 1, and it is probably the one that everyone is thinking. Sunday Night Football, it's Ravens against Bills in Buffalo. I mean, talk about, the two most recent MVP winners, 2 of the last 3 years. The run game, when you had Derrick Henry and James Cook, who were the lead rushers and touchdowns last year. And then I think for NFL fans, you have such a long off season, 6-7 months without NFL football. We try to disguise it and say we want to watch preseason, but no one actually enjoys preseason. Really, it's just a chance just to get that sort of almost get that itch again. But week 1 comes around. It's the best week of the year for me personally, because it's that exciting week where you've had such a long time without any regular season games, and they give us this absolute cracker to start the season. Sunday Night Football, Ravens against Bills. I mean, this is going to be electric. This was, of course, a divisional round last season, which is a great game, had a great ending, and I think there'll be a lot of Ravens players looking to have some sort of revenge. I don't think you can really get revenge in week 1 when there's a whole season left to go, but certainly there'll be a lot of focus on Mark Andrews, I'd imagine, in this game. Can Josh Allen carry on what he did last year? Are either team going to finally get that step further and make a Super Bowl? That's been the only real sort of question mark surrounding both quarterbacks and both head coaches, for that matter. Well, Harbaugh not as much, he's won one, but in recent years he's not been anywhere near to one. So both quarterbacks especially will be looking to try and answer those questions this season, and that'll be the one thing. Can any of them finally do it? I think if another year goes on where they've not made the Super Bowl again, there'll either be talks of it's the genius of Mahomes, or it's going to be they just can't do it in a big game in a big spot. So yeah, certainly a big one for those two. A chance to make a statement early, and Bills Ravens is my first nominee. Ben.
Yeah, that is the sensible week 1 pick rather than the weirdo draft hipster pick that I made. So I did have it on my long list, but I put it in italics because I thought Andy is too intelligent to not choose that game. So I was confident that you were going to pick that one. So I didn't need to. Now, I think you're right. You can't get revenge in week 1, but when it comes to the seeding in the playoffs, that head-to-head is going to be so important. So the winner of that game already has an advantage when it comes to the playoffs, because if they meet in the playoffs, then that game might be the reason that it's either in Buffalo or Baltimore. I think there are only 4 teams this season who, if they don't make the playoff, that don't make the Super Bowl, the season is a disaster. The Eagles, the Chiefs, the Ravens, and the Bills. Because the Ravens and the Bills, they can't keep doing this. They have been contenders every year. They've got, between them, 2 of the best quarterbacks in the league. I think there is a lot of pressure on both head coaches. And you're right, I don't see Harbaugh getting fired if they don't make the Super Bowl. But at some point, questions will really be asked about those 2 teams. And it's like, well, we've got the quarterbacks in Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. Do we need some coaching changes? Does something need to be done? Because I think both of them have a better roster than the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Chiefs just keep getting to the Super Bowl. So, like I say, 4 teams, I think it's a disaster for them if they don't make the Super Bowl. It's not to say only those 4 teams can make it. Obviously, there are other contenders. But the Lions, for example, they will be disappointed with how last season went. If they made it to the NFC Championship game but lost, I don't think people would feel like that was a disaster for the Lions. It would be very disappointing, but you've got 2 teams here meeting in week 1 who are absolutely thinking Super Bowl or bust, with players and coaches under a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned before in a lot of episodes before that Peyton Manning had years of, and John Elway, the same thing, had years of that question mark, can he make the big game? And then they eventually resolved that. But at least they made Super Bowls. Manning lost the Super Bowl, Elway lost one, and they eventually did. But Allen and Jackson haven't even made a Super Bowl. They both come close. They both made title games in the AFC. But I think that's, as you said, exactly.
And Peyton Manning needed a change of coach. Like, the Colts were always in contention. I mean, the thing is, they always had the roadblock of the Patriots. Although Manning was drafted, a couple of years before Tom Brady, they were both kind of in their prime at the same time. And it was when Tony Dungy took over the Colts that they found another level. And if you use that example for especially the Bills, only because Harbaugh's won a Super Bowl, then you could say, well, maybe Josh Allen just needs a different head coach. I'm not saying that, but the questions will eventually be asked if he can't get to a Super Bowl.
I agree totally. So, moving on to your second nominee, Ben. Which game are you putting forward?
Okay. I am going to say a game that I think is the one that your listeners have the most chance of being at, and that's Rams Jags at Wembley. I am really, really high on the Rams this year. Another team I think drafted really well, had a really good offseason. This is a team that I think is built to potentially win a Super Bowl in the next couple of years. They can get a couple more years out of Matt Stafford. I love getting to see the Rams because Sean McVay might be the brightest coach in the entire league. And I'm super, super excited to see Travis Hunter. I think by mid-season, when they get to Wembley, we will really know what Travis Hunter's role is, what sort of ratio of offensive snaps to defensive snaps he's playing. So there are 3 players I am desperate to watch this season who were drafted. One of them, I have not picked that player's team because there was not an appealing matchup. But for the Jags playing the Rams and it being at Wembley, absolutely sign me up. Even if it's just the Travis Hunter show, I want to see that in person.
I can't wait for it. I think since the UK matchup is probably my most favourite one to look forward to because, I'm hoping, I don't want to assume, if I can get media this year at London games again, the chance to interview Sean McVay is something I'm really excited for because he is my favourite coach in the NFL, maybe ever. But I just love Sean McVay's energy. I love him as a coach, and the chance, to see the Rams team, who haven't played since 2019, I think it's just going to be amazing. I mean, you've got Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, Kieran Williams on offense, and then the defense, the young guys, Jared Verse, Jaden Frisk, Kobe Durant, and Kobe Turner. It's some great young players on defense, and I think it's that what you're saying, Ben. I think they could be a team to look out for to win the NFC because they got a lot of players. They got that blend of experienced players like Stafford and Devontae Adams who can help them in big moments and big games, but also young players on rookie contracts like Verse, like Kobe Turner, like everyone else on their team, and Kieran Williams, Puka Nacua, they're all on rookie contracts, and it goes credit to Les Snead and the job he's done as GM to get these players, find these gems where no one else did. And I think that's their window to try and win it again and give Stafford one last chance to get a ring. And I think this is going to be, it could be one-sided. It could be quite a one-sided affair. I do think that it's one I did think about, but I thought is it going to be a Rams sort of whitewash like we saw a few times before with Jags games in the past, them getting sort of beat quite heavily? And I think Hunter is a difference maker for them. And I think that could make things interesting. And it'd be great to see if he does play on both sides of the ball, just to see that live in person. A player doing that. I don't think we've seen that. I've never seen that in person. The player doing,
no. And although I would expect, right now as we sit here in the middle of May, I would expect the Rams to win that game by more than 7. But I'm really intrigued by the Jags. I think they were so let down by their coaching last season, much like we were talking about the Bears coaches and how much better that team was once people started getting fired. I think the Jags, the way the Jags are set up right now, we'll really see whether Trevor Lawrence will be able to take that step into like the top 10 quarterbacks, which people felt confident about when he was coming out of college, had one of the greatest college careers of all time, now paired up with Liam Cohen. Although I would say the Rams should win that game, I think by that point, there's a good chance the Jags have got a decent record. That AFC South is not a brutal division. This is a team that could be coming into the game with a bit of confidence. It's weird that they're not playing 2 games. It's been a few years since they've only played the 1 game. So I'm not ruling out the Jags making this competitive, and that's the Liam Cohen factor for me.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of the sport. You just never know. And there's always one team each year that gets an injury bug. And I think the Rams could be that team that have the injury problems. And then by the time week 7 comes, those injuries would have probably come into force. So I think you just never know. And I think a lot of games, especially on a neutral venue, that could be, and especially with the Rams, the Jags having that London sort of experience and playing every year, they know how to do it. They know how to adjust to the time changes and everything like that. And as we've seen with Wembley the last few years, especially, the way they make that Jags home game feel to the stadium with all the flags, and it does always seem like these days a massive sea of teal when it comes to Wembley games. So I think, they beat the Bills a couple of years ago when no one thought that would happen. So yeah, you never know. They could just do it. So then my second choice is a game that moves on a bit further than my first choice, week 1. It's in week 6, so a week before the Rams take on the Jags. And it's what could easily be the Super Bowl preview. It's the Lions traveling to Arrowhead to take on the Chiefs. This, for me, is, I think, of the box office. And I think the Lions are a bit of a question mark. They have lost a couple of coordinators, so we don't know how that will affect them. But either way, you've got the running game of the Lions of Jahmyr Gibbs, and then you've got obviously the genius of Mahomes and Travis Kelce, hopefully having for him, one last hurrah, one last go at it. And I think, we've seen what happened when Goff and Mahomes met previously in 2018, 54-51. And I think this will be, in a lot of people's eyes, a potential Super Bowl preview. I think if they were both number 1 seeds last year, so that shows the quality there. They've not really lost either team really too many big names. They've kept sort of the core, so I don't see either team falling off, except maybe if the Lions have got a coordinator issue. And I do feel like, in what easily could be the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, I think this will be one that will be hyped up massively by the media. And this one, I believe, is Sunday Night Football as well, so there'll be a lot of prime time focus on it as well. And I think this could be one hell of a game.
When the Lions beat the Chiefs in that season opener year before last, that was like the coming out party for the Lions, where they'd started to build a team, they'd looked pretty good, and then in the opening game of the season, they beat the Super Bowl champions, got all the way to the NFC Championship game. They looked even better last year, but didn't get as far in the playoffs. It is going to be interesting to see the way that they play with all these new coaches. Now, Detroit have done a great job in the last 5 years of making just the right hires. Dan Campbell being able to, as a more of a kind of CEO type head coach, rather than the kind of X's and O's guy, he has been just flawless at the people he's brought into the building to fulfill his vision. So I'm pretty confident of him being able to judge the sort of coaches that he needs for his players. it is going to be a tough season for the Lions. They've got a tough schedule and they're in a tough division, and they may well lose more games than they did last season. But this is a team I expect to be fully in the thick of it. The Chiefs, I don't really know what to make of the Chiefs. Like, they didn't look good for lots of last season, but always found a way to win, in part because they've got the best coach in the game and they've got the best quarterback. So with this one, what we might take away from this most is, what can the Chiefs do against another Super Bowl contender? Are the Chiefs still going to be in contention? Will they take a step back? And by this point, we'll know a lot more about how these two teams are playing. The Lions, I think, are going to be fantastic. The Chiefs, I'm slightly less confident about, but that is an absolute must-see game.
Absolutely. So moving on to your third nominee, Ben, which game are you giving us?
Right, I'm gonna throw one out there that could be terrible.
Oh no,
could be absolutely terrible. It features a team, the home team in this game, where I think this could be a pretty poor team, really. Whatever happens between now and September, I don't think this is an exciting team. I think this is a team that is not quite sure what it wants to do. It's a team that can't seem to seems too proud to just completely rebuild, bottom out, and get itself like a top 5, top 3 draft pick, but also doesn't seem like a Super Bowl contender. They kind of seem stuck in the middle right now, whereas some teams like the Patriots got really bad, and I think now can be sprung the other way. So this home team I'm talking about is the Pittsburgh Steelers. And like I say, I think the Steelers are potentially the most boring team of this entire season. However, I think we're all feeling it's very, very, very likely that their person who will be playing quarterback for them is currently not on the roster, because that particular quarterback doesn't really want to have to go through mini camp and OTAs and all that stuff. I'm obviously talking about Aaron Rodgers, one of the most disruptive locker room presences anyone could imagine. I would imagine he is going to be the quarterback of the Steelers, and assuming he can stay upright like he failed to do in his first season at the Jets, then in week 8 he will have the Packers come to town, and I want to see that. Now, it's been put on Sunday Night Football because they are assuming it's going to be Aaron Rodgers. Now, if Aaron Rodgers somehow does not sign with the Steelers, that game is a dud. Or if he does what he did with the Jets and just goes down after like 3 snaps, that game is a dud, because nobody wants to watch whoever the Steelers are going to put out a quarterback is going to be ugly. But if it's Aaron Rodgers and it's the Packers, this could only be better if it was a home game for the Packers and have Rodgers go into that atmosphere, a night game at Lambeau with him being booed, because Packers fans really turned on Aaron Rodgers, and with good reason. I think he was disrespectful to the Packers with the way that he conducted his business when he was looking to leave. So I cannot wait for this. The games when Favre played the Packers were just absolute box office. That Steelers team is not as good as the Vikings team that Brett Favre was on. But I cannot wait for this, providing it's Aaron Rodgers. If it's Aaron Rodgers, I don't care how boring the Steelers are, I want to watch this game.
Me too. I not even thought about this game. This was, hell of a prospect. Yeah, that's. I remember the excitement around when Brady played against the Patriots. I know it was at Foxborough rather than for Rodgers at Green Bay, but I think this of similarity probably I was surprised Brady got booed, but I wouldn't be surprised if Rodgers got booed by the Packers fans. And I think and I think as well, not even just that. I think you've got DK Metcalf there now. You've got a great receiving group in Green Bay, and then I think that the defensive stars. You've got particularly for the Steelers, TJ Watt, and then Matt LaFleur's defensive coaching is at times really good. So Yeah, I think this game wasn't really on my list, but I can see why you put it in because, yeah, if Rodgers does sign with the Steelers, and I can imagine he does because, he will even because they haven't really addressed it. They bought Will Howard in the draft. I say bought. They've picked Will Howard in the draft, but I don't think he's the guy they've picked to be, the guy for the future. I think they would have maybe got Shadir Sanders if they felt like he was a guy for the future, which no one did until round 5. So, yeah, I think this is a really exciting game, and I think, yeah, now we could be seeing Rodgers in Dublin. I mean, talking about the Steelers, I mean, that's one to think about was the game in Dublin. I think for the occasion being the first ever game in Dublin, and yeah, I think we could see him then against. Well, either way, there's still rumours of him going to the Vikings. We could see him either way in Dublin if it's all the Vikings. But yeah, that game
that would be a real turn of events if he did get to the Vikings instead, and then is playing. I mean, I think the Vikings are going to blow the Steelers out in Dublin anyway. But my God, if they don't even have Aaron Rodgers to potentially keep it close, then oh boy, it's a good job the atmosphere in the stadium is going to be good because that game might be not great.
Well, I think people talk about in our football, European football, about they should now start to have, because people are getting sick and tired of Fabrizio Romano. They said they should have like a wrestling style thing where no one knows who their team signed until the first game of the season. So they have this image of, like The Undertaker, players being announced for Chelsea or Man U or Liverpool or Arsenal, and no one knows about it. I would love it in week 4 if Rodgers is still without a team and they go, right, Rodgers has picked his team. It's going to be Steelers or the Vikings. Find out on Sunday at kickoff, and he comes out with this massive ray of steam, especially if it's the Steelers being the home team. That would just be incredible. If they could pull that off, that would be almost like, when LeBron James had his thing where he picked his team live on TV when he went to the Heat.
Yeah.
I would love that if it was almost like the NFL equivalent where Rodgers just comes out and that would be amazing to be there for or just watch on TV. That would be sensational.
Yeah. You gotta text Roger Goodell now and give him that idea.
I think it would get TV ratings. It was silly. I mean, they probably rather be an American soil when that happens. But just imagine in Dublin's first NFL game and that happens. It would just be such a memorable moment. I'm here for it. I really am.
There was talk that Rodgers might announce that he was going to go to a particular team immediately before the broadcast of the NFL schedule last night to just take all the attention away from the schedule. Now, it didn't happen, but the fact that there was speculation in the media, I don't think it's that they had these rumors. I think it's just the way that they perceive Aaron Rodgers loving to get that attention and pulling the conversation towards him. So it's perfect for Aaron Rodgers. Your suggestion, he'd love it. I'm sure. I mean, in public, he would be like, no. But deep down, he'd be like, yes.
So my third choice is a game that is actually on my favorite week of the year, Thanksgiving week, because we're getting a full NFL slate twice in the space of 3 days. You get on the Thursday and the Sunday, and I love the idea of coming home from work. You sit down after finishing work. I get home around 6 o'clock when these games start. And the idea of sitting down, watching Thanksgiving football when there's all the halftime events. Obviously, they do stuff in the studio as well. And I think this is one of the best weeks of the season. But technically, my game is one that's going to be a bit later than the first game. And it involves, on a personal note, my favourite NFL player up against my favourite, or now ex, but Dolphins player. Ravens at Bengals. Now, people like to think it's weird that I like Mike Gesicki so much, but Derrick Henry is a guy that I've talked about a lot on this podcast, a guy that I absolutely love to watch. And the thought of this, Joey Burrow against Lamar Jackson, you've got Derrick Henry, you've got Jamar Chase. If he stays, Trey Hendrickson, the Ravens defense, which just bleeds sacks. It's a hell of a matchup, and I think we get a lot of times on Thanksgiving games where they're maybe not as good. I mean, a lot of times you get Cowboys playing someone, either the Cowboys are bad or the team they're playing are bad. The Lions for years couldn't win a game on Thanksgiving. but I always look forward to the third game because that's one where it's completely neutral. And even though it's not the tradition like Detroit or Dallas, I always intrigued what the third game is going to be, and I think this one's going to be excellent. And two great offenses. I think the Ravens could destroy them. I think the Bengals defense leaves a lot to be desired, but I think from an offense point of view, we've seen the Bengals and Ravens, in previous years, AFC North matchup. Last year alone, I mean, you had one of the greatest throws I've seen in years with Lamar Jackson in the first game of the two. Both games drew up, massive scorelines, and one of them went to overtime. We had missed kicks from Evan McPherson. Division games always sort of dial up good games, I think. Have it on Thanksgiving, on prime time, two teams that know how to get done on offense. I think this game could be absolutely electric.
And I love Thanksgiving games as well. And yeah, that feeling of you finished work and boom, there's 3 games on now. You don't have to wait till the weekend. And plus then the next night, Friday, 8 p.m, Bears Eagles as well. So they're really treating us with 4 games over those 2 days. And this might be the best looking Thanksgiving slate that we've had, with Packers at Lions, Chiefs at Cowboys, Bengals at Ravens. I don't know what we're going to see out of the Cowboys, but if they're decent, you've got 6 really good teams there. I think the Bengals are a fascinating team this year. Obviously, there's all the issues with Trey Hendrickson, where he said like the other day that he might just sit out the season, which I think if he sits out the season, talk about that Bengals defense, that is a hammer blow to them. I don't think they can compete without Trey Hendrickson. I think losing that piece would just cause so many problems for them, especially in a game like this against Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. The Bengals were obviously unlucky in the end to not make the playoffs. And if one result had gone their way, they'd have been in the playoffs as perhaps the hottest team in the NFL at that point. I don't think anybody would have wanted to play them. They had their struggles earlier in the year. I think these are 2 teams that are Super Bowl contenders. I think it's a brilliant game and a great way to finish those 3. I want to ask you something though about Thanksgiving games. How do you feel about the tradition of the Lions always hosting the first game, Cowboys always hosting the second game? Because lots of people have said these should be shared around. I have my thoughts. I'm curious. I want to pick your brain.
I think keep as it is. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. People, there's a whole thing about the Guard of Honor right now in the Premier League, and people seem to want to try and sort of abandon traditions. I think, with how long it's gone on for, I think personally, you've still got a third game anyway. You can share around that way, and teams, they can alternate who they play each year as well. I have no problem with it staying as it is personally. Are you the same as me?
I am 100% the same as you. I love the tradition, and I get especially when we had so long where the Lions were bad, and I get it. And as a Bears fan, it meant I got to see the Bears on Thanksgiving quite a lot, and usually against a bad Lions team, which meant a nice, easy Bears win. And there were a lot of mismatches in those first games, especially because it would often be a divisional game, and it would be the Lions losing to a good Packers team or a good Vikings team or a good Bears team, while the Lions just could not get off the floor. Now, obviously, they're really good, so the conversation has gone away. But if they go bad again, or the Cowboys are just not competitive for a period, we'll start to hear the argument again that, oh, we shouldn't have this, and we see too much of the NFC North and too much of the NFC East in this slot. That's just the tradition. I do not want... The NFL have messed with so much scheduling. I don't like it being 17 games. It should be 16. That's not going back the other way. But I never want to see it changed where we don't have the Lions at 6 p.m. and the Cowboys at 9:30 p.m. on a UK time on a Thanksgiving. That should be set in stone forever.
I think we're starting to see tradition with other things. I mean, I don't know whether this is one of your games you want to pick, but the Chiefs are starting to now make Christmas Day their tradition. And I think there's talk about it potentially them wanting to make Christmas Day the Chiefs' equivalent of Thanksgiving in Dallas and Detroit. And yeah, I mean, I've been to a game in Thanksgiving in Detroit, and it is just incredible experience. And I think to lose that would be, I think just be for just the whole NFL family, I think it would just be detrimental. And I do think that whilst, other teams can get involved, I think, if it's worked for 100 years or however long it's been going on for, I don't see any reason why they should stop that. Moving on to your fourth game, Ben, what are you picking?
I am going another Week 8 game. Packers Steelers is Week 8, and it's Commanders at Chiefs. Monday Night Football in Week 8. I'm actually not super high on the Washington Commanders this year. Purely, I think they might not be as good as they were last year. A lot of those games were very tight, a bit fluky. That's not to say they were not a really good team, and they were not lucky in the playoffs. Those were deserved victories. Jane Daniels was an instant star. This is a team that I think the coaching is fantastic, and I think they had a really good offseason. I think a bit like the Lions, I think their next playoff appearance won't be as advanced. The Lions, they got to the NFC Championship game and then took a step back. I could see the Commanders doing that, but I think the Commanders are going to be so fun to watch. This is a team that has barely been in primetime games, it seems like, for about 2 decades. Deservedly. This was a terribly run franchise, picking the worst players, and when they did get themselves someone who seemed like a star, RG3, he was coached into an injury. So we all hope that doesn't happen to Jaden Daniels. I've seen people say this is Patrick Mahomes against the next Patrick Mahomes. I do not see it like that, and I'm not going to frame it that way. But this is Patrick Mahomes, the most exciting quarterback we've seen of his generation, and Jaden Daniels, who looks like he could be the most exciting of new crop coming through. So I think any chance to see Jaden Daniels is going to be something that we should take. But against a major contender like this, and the sort of quarterback that he wants to measure himself against, this is the ideal game. And like I say, I'm really fascinated by what the Chiefs are going to be this year, because they can't repeat what they did last year. So this is something where there's going to be a lot of points and has the chance to be a statement game for either one.
Yeah, that is, such an exciting game. And I do feel like we were saying similar things, what we're saying about Jaden Daniels last year, CJ Stroud and the Texans sort of didn't quite do what we thought they did. And they added players in the offseason, like the Commanders have this offseason with Deebo Samuel. So I do feel like the Commanders have to be wary of the sophomore slump. And it's all good winning games when you're maybe an underdog, but when now teams are expecting you to be good and you're being predicted to win more games, sometimes when this classic phrase, when the hunters become the hunted, and I do feel like we have to be wary of that. But I think the job Dan Quinn did last year was brilliant. And I feel like at that point in the season as well, we'll know a lot more about the two teams. And I think if the Commanders can get a win against the Chiefs, I think that, will be a huge statement. And I think that, again, could go a long way to seeding, could go a long way to deciding who wins the Super Bowl. If the Chiefs lose the game, they could drop down to the 2nd or 3rd seed, and the Commanders, get a win, they could sneak in and, potentially sneak a division through that game. So at that point in the year, it's going to be, week 9, it's going to be really interesting to see how they are. Of course, no one knows how it goes, because a lot of teams who start off, they're 4th in one year, they're 3rd the next, and vice versa. So you never know. And that aforementioned injury bug that every team gets, one team a year gets, it could be a case where the game could be a dud. You never know. If Mahomes goes down injured in week 3, then but that probably won't happen because he's remained pretty much injury free his entire time. So this should be a hell of a game, and I'm really looking forward to seeing Daniels against Mahomes. And the AFC has so many good quarterbacks: Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Mahomes, Burrow, Justin Herbert, whereas the NFC definitely has less, I think, star quarterbacks. I think Daniels is that guy for the Commanders. And I think this would be a hell of a win if they can get it against the Chiefs. Now, week 4 is a game in week 15 that I have picked, 9:25 p.m. It's involving 2 quarterbacks that were part of one of the most infamous recent trades in NFL history. It's Jared Goff against Matt Stafford as the Lions travel to the Rams. I think once again it'll just be the narrative may have died a little bit at this point, but the whole who won the trade thing will come back again. At this point of the year, it'll be crucial for the NFC ranking. I think both teams will be battling out for that number one seed. I think if if the Rams and Lions aren't in the top three NFC seeds by wildcard round, I'd be shocked. I think these teams, unless injuries happen, are primed to have good seasons again. And I think, again, it's that Golf Stafford rivalry they built, not for any hatred, just more through that trade. And I'm just really excited to see, what could happen here. And of course, we've had it in Detroit a couple of times in the playoffs and the regular season, but not had it, I believe, yet in LA. Maybe Puff, I think they met in the first year. I think that might have been in LA, but it's been mostly in Detroit recently. The games between Stafford and Goff since the trade, and I do feel like in this game, Week 15 will be a lot of riding on that point. It'll be the third to last game of the season for these two teams. I believe it's the Lions' last road game of the year. I could be wrong on that, but either way, I think both teams have got such good players. The run game especially is going to be really good to see. If you like the run game, this game's for you. I mean, Kieran Williams up against Jahmyr Gibbs. This game, I think, could be lights out at a really important time of the year, and I think this will be one with a lot of media focus with that trade.
Yeah, it's going to be crucial for seeding, you'd imagine. Both of these teams will have aspirations to win their division. I think the 49ers have got on paper, the easier schedule. I certainly think the Rams have got a better team than them, but it's not an easy division necessarily, but the Lions obviously have a super, super tough division. So losing a game out of the division, if on that same week the Packers and the Vikings pick up wins, for example, it's bad. So at that point of the year, once you get into like end of November, around December, those games against playoff contenders are just absolutely crucial. It's going to take putting a Super Bowl ring on Jared Goff's finger for anyone to say the Lions won that trade. Now, it set up the Lions in a great way. They've done brilliantly out of that trade. But the Rams got a Super Bowl out of it and have stayed in contention, whereas I think we all felt that they got that Super Bowl and then they took a step back and it was like, okay, well, they threw everything forward to win a ring. They did it. Now they've got to rebuild, and they didn't need to fully rebuild. That's the magic of McVay and everything he can get out of Stafford. It's almost a wonder that he didn't get more out of Goff because of what we've seen from Jared Goff since he's been in Detroit. And we know that Sean McVay is an absolute genius, but Jared Goff's game has changed. He's become one of the most reliable quarterbacks in the league. But right now, Andy, I'll put you on the spot. Who would you rather have as your quarterback, Matt Stafford or Jared Goff?
Oh, Matt
Not
Stafford.
necessarily for...
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So, the Lions, it was interesting, that trade, because they were happy to let Stafford go with their blessing. That he had toiled on some bad Lions teams, never had a tantrum, never moaned about the team, never threw the team under the bus, just worked hard, put them in positions to win, and was a hero for them. And credit to the Lions and credit to the Lions fans for not hating Stafford, for wanting a shot on a different team to win a Super Bowl, which he got. It's worked out brilliantly. I'm looking forward to this game. I'm looking forward to most Lions games, to be honest. And we've already said about how interesting the Rams are going to be. So, yeah, having that one late in the season just gives it extra spice.
Absolutely. So, Ben, your final nominee for our list, what are you picking?
And I'm so pleased that I've been able to do this without doubling up on teams and not picking divisional games. Those challenges I set myself really caused me problems because it meant I really wanted to do in week 2, Bears at Lions, having Ben Johnson go back to Detroit. That's something that I think is going to be fascinating, but that couldn't make the list for me, divisional game. And I'm really interested to see the Bears and their rematch against the Commanders in week 6 after the debacle with the Hail Mary. So I like that, but I had to put Commanders Chiefs game in, so I couldn't have another Commanders game. So week 11, Lions at Eagles. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the Lions. We've not really mentioned the Eagles. If I remember correctly, they won the Super Bowl. Pretty sure on that one. I think it was a close one. Is that right? Did they struggle to beat the Chiefs? So this Eagles team, once again, they've drafted really well. They just continue to look good. It's like good teams don't rebuild, they just reload. And they keep reloading, putting fantastic players on that roster. To me, they are still the best team in the NFC. And there's only a few teams that can take them down. The Lions are one of those teams that can take them down. This is a pivotal game for the Lions because they have to show, after the disappointments of the playoffs last season, they've got to show what they can do against the best. You want to be the best, you got to beat the best. There's a good chance for the Lions to get to the Super Bowl. They are going to have to play the Eagles in January. If they can go into Philadelphia in week 11, beat the Eagles, that will do so much for their confidence and so much for the way that the Eagles will view the Lions. And that will really make the playoffs even more interesting. So that's my final pick. That one's a more sensible pick after Packers Steelers, which could be awful. Raiders Patriots, that everyone will be like, wait, what? And a Jags game. This one is perhaps my most sensible. You can't argue with Lions at Eagles on Sunday Night Football.
I think your dog agrees with that as well.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
It's all good. Now, you mentioned sensible picks. First of all, that game is absolutely electric. I've also gone for the Eagles, but I've gone for one a bit further back than week 11. Week 2, you mentioned Super Bowl. I've gone for the rematch of the Chiefs against the Eagles in Arrowhead. And yeah, for me, this game is going to be so good. Of course, we all know what the narrative is going to be, especially so early on in the season. It's going to be looking back at that game in New Orleans. It's going to be looking back at that Eagles defensive performance. Can they do it again, despite some players maybe leaving? But I think you take all that away, all of the Super Bowl narrative. It's two good teams and two good quarterbacks up against each other. It's two great coaches. And a game that has, drawn up some great games in the past. I mean, there was a game, I think it was the Eagles against the Chiefs. Or was it Bills against the Chiefs where Mahomes had that outburst? It might have been against the Bills, actually, think about it. But either way, Chiefs, Eagles, it's two good teams, two of the best teams. They've played in 2 Super Bowls in the last 4 years. 4 years. They've played in Super Bowls. They've met a lot in big games. And this is another one. Again, like I said before, I don't think you can really call it a revenge match in week 2, but the Chiefs will look to make a statement that show that they can compete with the Eagles. Whereas the Eagles go out again, especially in Arrowhead, and they go out and win by the same scoreline again, or they win by 20 points. It'll just be, we all know how it will go. It'll be, is a Chiefs dynasty over? Is Kelsey done? Is Mahomes declining? Is Andy Reid? All that stuff, that will all be there if the Chiefs lose. And it'll just further add to the Eagles sort of Super Bowl hype. I think personally they will make it again because not many teams do go back to back and make Super Bowls, but it'll add to their sort of hype and their sort of confidence they can go out and win again, especially if they win in dominant fashion. But if the Chiefs win in Arrowhead, that could already in week 2 be a season-defining game, or give them that confidence back that they can beat the Eagles. And if they were to meet again in the Super Bowl, then I think that would definitely help. So yeah, for me personally, that game is one I think we can all look forward to. So there we are.
I'm just going to say, I'm really glad that game is in week 2 because I think it sets a narrative early in the season because like you say, if it's basically a repeat of what we saw in February, major questions will be asked about the Chiefs. Like, okay, it's all well and good what you've been able to do, but if you've got to play a team like the Eagles, you don't have a shot. So, you need to rethink things. On the other hand, if somehow they then, I say somehow like it's almost impossible, but if somehow they beat the Eagles, then all of a sudden it's all flipped. Like, right, the Chiefs have figured this out. That if these two meet in the Super Bowl again, it is not going to be like it was in February. So yeah, I'm glad. Obviously it's a huge game, and I'm glad it's early rather than later in the year. I want it to be a tone setter for both teams.
I couldn't agree more. So we have our top 10. So I've gone for Ravens Bills week 1, Lions at Chiefs week 6, Ravens at Bengals Thanksgiving, Lions at Rams week 15, and Eagles at Chiefs week 2. Whereas Ben has gone for Raiders at Patriots week 1, Rams at Jags week 7, Steelers versus Packers week 8, Commanders at Chiefs, and also week 11, Lions at the Eagles. Now, we're going to have to try and compile this and get a top 10 in here. Now, is there any of the top 10 or sort of your 5, Ben, that you feel has to be in the top 5 regardless? Anyone that you'd like to give me one game out of the 5 you've given me? Give me one game that you think should be in the top 5 regardless.
I think Lions at Eagles has to be top 5. And I'm going to throw you a bone here. And I'm going to say I don't have any problem with you putting Raiders, Patriots, Rams, Jags, Packers, Steelers in the bottom 5. I am fine with that. I'm psyched about those games, potentially. But on paper, they are not the blockbusters of some of the ones that you've put forward.
Well, if that's the case, I will give one that I want to have and also one that I'm happy to have in my bottom 5. I think I have to have Ravens Bills in the top 5. I feel like that for week 1 opener when the excitement's there, that has to be top 5 for me. And I'm happy to, I think because the game out of my 5, this one could be the least sort of tight, the more one-sided. I think with that Bengals defense, potentially how it's going to be, I'm happy to have Ravens Bengals in the bottom 5 because it could be one where it's done by halftime. So, or maybe not, but yeah, I think that's one I will pick. So, in the end, so try and get 10 to 5. We've got Ravens, Pats, Jags, Rams, Steelers, Packers, and Ravens, Bengals now bottom 5. How is that? I think personally, I know you picked it first, but I think Raiders Patriots might be because they've drafted well, but we all know how the NFL works. They could be bust. Like you can't really ever.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I say, it's why I want to see him in week 1 before any of the shine is taken off. I can see that game with total optimism, but I think it's totally fair to make that number 10, and I think probably Rams at Jags number 9, and I would say Packers Steelers number 8. Yeah, I'm looking forward to all those games, but I think in terms of the rankings, I think that is a fair way of doing it. And to jump ahead a little bit, I think your week 1 selection of Ravens Bills, I think that's number 1. I think that's number 1 overall. It was the first one I put on my list, and I thought Andy's got to pick that game. He's not an idiot. So I'm not going to pick that game. I think that's number 1 personally, followed by Eagles Chiefs. That's my thoughts of 1 and 2 there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to have that. I mean, that was my number 1 pick, so I'm happy to have that number 1. And I think, for fairness, I'll put Ravens Bengals at 7, one of my picks, which means we've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now you mentioned Eagles Chiefs. Now,
you're not so convinced. Not so convinced as I am.
I'm 2. I think definitely I'm happy to have a top 5, but I don't know whether it may be.
Is it because we've seen that game so recently and it was a blowout?
Yeah, maybe. Although, for personally, I should be quite excited about it because it brings back a lot of good memories being at New Orleans for it. I should be excited about it more. But then I don't think if you gave me my other ones, Lions Chiefs, Lions Rams, Eagles Chiefs, then your Commanders Chiefs, I think what I want to watch the most, Eagles against the Chiefs. I think that probably is number 2, to be fair, because of all the ones you got left, that's the one I think I would, if I had to be locked in a Aaron Rodgers, darkness chamber, and got given one game to watch that day, I think I would pick that one. So, give me Eagles Chiefs 2 then. So that means we've got position 3, 4, 5, and 6. We've got Lions Chiefs, Lions Rams, Commanders Chiefs, and Lions Eagles. Now, I think Lions Eagles could be.
I think we need to get a Lions game up in that top 3 there, because we got plenty of Eagles and plenty of Chiefs left as well. But I think we want a Lions game up there. So I think that's a very good idea, number 3.
So we try and get maybe down to number 6 now. Try and get one that we think is the least exciting out of Lions at Rams, Commanders at Chiefs, and also Lions at Chiefs. Now, I'm happy to concede Lions at Rams because we've seen it quite a few times in recent years.
I'd agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
That means we've got 4 and 5, and we're torn between Lions at Chiefs and Commanders at Chiefs.
I think Lions Chiefs should top Commanders Chiefs. We've seen the Lions good for a few years now. The Commanders we've seen once. So I think the Lions deserve that higher ranking in that game if they're both playing the Chiefs. The Chiefs have done well out of this list, considering they were often not very good last season. They would get those wins, but the way their schedule has lined up this year, there's a lot of games where you think, oh, I cannot miss that one.
You know what I think we're going to see? That I could be wrong here. I know they brought out a documentary or behind-the-scenes film footage from last year. I can't remember who the broadcaster is, but I think this is Kelsey's last season personally, and I think the amount of games they get a lot of TV coverage, and I think we could see, recorded this year but released years later. I think what we could see is an NFL equivalent of The Last Dance with Kelsey Mahomes, because I feel like I could be wrong, but I think that with the amount of coverage they get, they might release it the next season. You never know, but I think that could be something we could see in a few years. Certainly, I think personally could be some sort of documentary of Kelsey's last year with Taylor Swift involved in a lot of stuff. Mahomes, of course, one of the best quarterbacks of our era. I think that could be something we could see in the next few years.
I 100% do not want to watch that, Andy. I absolutely do not want to watch it. That's not to say I don't think it'll happen or that no one else wants to watch it. I do not want to watch that. I do not want to watch it. And I'm probably in the minority, but I don't want to watch it. It feels like exactly the sort of thing that would happen, but I do not want to watch it. I'm done with that. Done with it.
I can see it. Because when Mahomes first came through, I absolutely loved watching him play. But I think it's like any sport. I got sick of Roger Federer winning Wimbledon's, and I got sick of in football massively winning. And I think I don't like seeing the same team winning again. And I'm sort of now sick of seeing the Chiefs everywhere. I know they're good and they're amazing to watch at times, but I've seen it too much now. I need fresh teams to win it, which is why I'm glad they lost. Even though it'd have been great to have been there for the three-peat at the same time, I think to have someone different win it actually was probably the best outcome. So our top 10 list is here. We've got it narrowed down. So from 10 to 1, we've got Raiders at Pats week 1. Number 9 is Rams at Jags in week 7. Number 8 is Packers versus Steelers. Number 7 is Ravens at Bengals on Thanksgiving. Number 6 is the Lions at the Rams in week 15. Number 5 is the Washington Commanders at the Chiefs. And then number 4 is the Lions at the Chiefs in week 6. Number 3 is Lions at Eagles week 11. And number 2 is Eagles at the Chiefs in a rematch of Super Bowl 59 in week 2. And then finally, our number 1 choice for our top 10 games to look forward to in 2025 is week 1, Sunday Night Football, Ravens going to Buffalo. Now, before we do end the show, was there any of the games that you were looking at? Because I had loads of honourable mentions that I thought about. Was there any of the games that you sort of picked out that you couldn't quite include in the list?
Just the 2 that I mentioned, because I was so strict with myself. Because like you, I could have had such a long list, and because of my rules, it was just that Bears Lions and Bears Commanders just the intrigue of after the Hail Mary and Ben Johnson. There were loads of great games. But those were the only other two that I made a note of, so I didn't drive myself crazy.
Well, I had a fair few. I'm not going to lie. I said before I had 18 to pick from. I want to give these games, just giving them the mention they need. I had Rams Eagles week 3. Week 3 again, Monday Night Football, Lions at Ravens, Ravens the Chiefs week 4. I thought about Chiefs Bills in week 9, but I thought, to be honest, it doesn't matter the Bills beat the Chiefs in the regular season. They can't beat them in the postseason for now. So I kind of didn't want to include that in a way. Lions and Commanders week 10. And then my final one was just Eagles Bills week 17. I did think about that one. Of course, the Dublin game, I mentioned the whole Dublin game. I think that's going to be a monumentous occasion. And then finally, I had Rams at Ravens week 6, Bengals at Bills week 14, and one that you mentioned, actually, Lions at Eagles week 11. So there we are. That is the end of our episode. Ben, first of all, thank you for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure. I'll say one more game. I'm actually really interested in week 1 Titans Broncos because I just really want to see how Cam Ward looks in a Titans uniform. I'm a draft nerd. I like to see these guys, and like I say, I like to see them early. But yeah, this was great fun. Thanks for inviting me on, even though I was cursing you when I was like, there are just too many games to narrow it down. But I did make it more difficult for myself. And I am pleased that I had some of the more unpredictable choices so that we had a good mix of teams, because it's very easy to be like, well, these are the teams I want to see and they're playing each other, and to look beyond that. So if I can get a few people listening to this that decide, okay, yeah, I am going to watch Raiders Patriots. I want to see how Drake May looks with this new Mike Vrabel team. And I want to see Ashton Genty, see if he's exciting as everyone says he is. So and one thing that we always need to know is that there are teams that surprise us in good ways and bad ways. And there'll be games that we won't look twice at now, that mid-season we'll be like, oh, this is game of the week, right? So that's the beauty of the NFL. It is unpredictable. We don't know for sure which teams will be good, but I think we've picked 10 really intriguing and interesting games.
I think you're right, because I don't think anyone would have had Vikings Jets last year being the best London game, but it was, and no one thought the Vikings would win 14 games, and no one thought the Dolphins would be 2-6 at one point, and we all thought the Bears would be making the playoffs or at least being competitive. So we didn't know how the season goes out. Injuries happen, players hit bad form. It's just the beauty of the sport. You just don't know what's going to happen, and it just changes on. I think as well, because every game's so important. 18 games rather than 36 in football, or 38 in football, or 100 in baseball, or 80 in basketball. I think it means these games having 17 a year, or 16 for a team, 17 weeks for a fan. It just makes all the games really, really important. I think that's why they always have such a massive amount of importance. They're also watchable. I think with football, you can sometimes miss a game, you'd be fine. But if you miss a week of NFL action, that's it, you're gone, and you've lost out already. So yeah, I think I'm really looking forward to this season. I'm not looking forward to the Dolphin season, if I'm honest. I'm not too excited about it. I think it's going to be an 8-9, 9-8 season, missing out the playoffs, but you never know. But yeah, there we are. Thank you all for listening, and don't forget to use code Andy5 at checkout in Fantasy Game Day app for money back off your first paid lineup. And don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and also check out Ben's work on not only the Nat Coombs Show, where he's often alongside former guest Nat Coombs, but also his College Day series on the same feed, where he gets to talk all things college with another friend of the show, another former guest in Dom Corbett. Check that out on all podcast platforms. Meanwhile, this has been the Across the Pod NFL podcast, our top 10 games to look forward to in the 2025 NFL season, and we'll see you guys next time.